Welcome back to the deep dive.
Hey there.
Today, we're plunging into a really transformative sector. We're looking at the global business management consulting service market,
Mm,
specifically how it's set to change, really evolve over the next decade or so. We've got some great market outlook research here.
yeah, some fascinating numbers.
Exactly. And our mission really is to give you a shortcut, help you understand this space because it's moving fast. Okay, let's unpack this.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting here, I think, is that these market insights, they aren't just figures on a page, right?
Right.
They really reveal the deeper shifts happening in what businesses globally actually need.
Yeah.
So understanding these consulting trends, it's not just for, people in the industry. It's, I think, crucial for anyone interested in the future of strategy innovation,
Yeah.
right? Basically how companies plan to navigate what's coming.
That makes sense. Businesses need that guidance.
They really do.
Yeah.
More than ever, it seems.
Okay, so let's look at that big global picture first. The growth trajectory. It's pretty impressive, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely.
Think about this. Back in 2021, the market globally already valued around $146 billion.
Which is substantial to begin with.
Right. But get this, by 2025, it's forecast to jump up to over 183 billion.
Okay.
And then looking out further to 2033, it's expected to surge. We're talking nearly $290 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's driven by a really robust compound annual growth rate, the CAGR of almost 6%, 5.863% to be exact, for that whole period.
Yeah, nearly 6%. That really sets the stage, doesn't it? It shows why companies are turning more and more to, external expertise.
So what's behind that? What are the fundamental drivers?
Well, that consistent upward trend, it's not happening in a vacuum, like you said. It's fundamentally fueled by a few key things. One is just growing demand for strategic guidance. Companies need help charting their course.
Makes sense. The world's complex.
Exactly. Then there's the just relentless push for digital transformation. Consultants are, critical guides there.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, it's the ongoing quest for operational efficiency. Businesses across all sorts of industries realize they need specialized help to optimize, to innovate, to stay competitive.
Okay, so strategic advice, digital help, and efficiency. Got it. Now let's zoom in a bit. Where's a lot of this activity happening? Let's start with North America.
Good place to start. Major market share.
Huge share, yeah. And the projections there are also really robust. It was around, what, $68 billion in 2021?
Yeah, that's 68.3 billion.
Okay, so from there, it's forecast to hit almost $85 billion by 2025,
Mm-hmm.
and then climb way up to nearly $130 billion by 2033. Still growing strong at about 5.5% annually.
Right. And, within North America, you can break it down further. The U.S., obviously, the giant share.
The lion's share.
Exactly. Expected to grow from about 57 billion to over 107 billion by 2033. That's a healthy CAGR, just over 5.3%.
Still solid.
Very solid. But what's quite interesting is Canada is projected to really accelerate. It starts smaller, around 6 billion,
Right.
but it's expected to more than double, hitting over 12.5 billion by 2033. That's a stronger CRE, over 6.3%.
Oh, interesting. Faster growth there.
Yeah, a bit faster. And Mexico's not far behind either, expanding significantly. Expected to almost double its market to over 10 billion, growing around 5.7% annually.
So strong demand across the board in North America.
Definitely underscores that consistent need for external strategy.
Okay, let's shift gears. Across the Atlantic, Europe. How's the market looking there?
Europe's showing steady, pretty significant expansion too. Maybe not the explosive growth of some other regions, but still very solid.
Okay, what are the numbers?
It was valued just over $30 billion in 2021.
Right.
That's expected to rise to over $37 billion in 2025, and the projection for 2033 is nearly $57 billion.
Okay, so still almost doubling over that longer period.
Exactly. And the CAGR is respectable, about 5.4% annually.
And within Europe, are there standouts?
Yeah, there's some interesting variations. Germany, for instance, being a major economic powerhouse.
Right.
It shows a really impressive KGR, actually over 6.1%, set to more than double its market size, from about 6 billion up to over 12 billion.
Wow, okay. Germany's strong.
Very strong.
Yeah.
The UK also shows good growth, projected to double its market as well, reaching over 7.6 billion. That's about a 5.8% CGR.
Okay.
Then you see consistent growth in places like France, Italy, Spain, generally around the 5% mark, maybe slightly above or below.
So still healthy growth, across the major economies.
Definitely. It reflects that ongoing need for, business optimization, adapting strategically.
Hmm.
And these varying rates, they often reflect the unique economic conditions, right?
Sure.
Like Germany's industrial strength driving demand for operational excellence,
Yeah.
or maybe the UK's financial sector needing specific consulting. Even smaller markets like, say, Luxembourg show growth, go at a slightly slower pace, maybe 3.4%. It varies.
Got it. Okay, now, you mentioned explosive growth earlier. Asia Pacific. This sounds like where things get really interesting.
Yeah, this is the one highlighted as the fastest growing region globally.
Okay.
And the projections are really impressive. It jumps from around $24 billion in 2021
Right.
to over $32 billion by 2025.
Right.
But then looking out to 2033, it just soars.
Yeah.
Over $56 billion.
56 billion and the CAGR.
Remarkable. Over 7%, 7.198% to be precise,
Yeah.
outpacing every other major region we've looked at.
Wow. Okay, so who's driving that within APAC?
Well, several key players. China, for instance, huge growth. Projected to more than double its market. It goes from about $6.9 billion
Okay.
to over $16 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR over 7.4%.
Strong.
Very strong. Japan's also seeing robust growth, around 6.6% CAGR. But the real standout, the highest CAGR across any country in this data, is India.
India. Okay, what's the number?
Get this. It leaps from around $3.3 billion in 2021 to over $8.3 billion by 2033.
Wow.
Has an annual growth rate of 8.09%.
Over 8%. That's incredible.
It really is. It suggests just this massive wave of businesses, rapidly modernizing, looking for fundamental strategic help, huge digital transformations.
In these booming economies.
Exactly. Places like Singapore also showing really high growth, nearly 7.8%. Southeast Asia as a whole, also close to 7.9%. South Korea, Australia, Taiwan, all showing strong KGRs, mostly in the 6-7% range.
It just underscores how dynamic those markets are right now.
Absolutely. A real engine for global growth in this sector.
Okay, let's keep moving around the globe. South America. What's the picture there? Emerging momentum, I see.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Not quite the APAC explosion, but definitely healthy growth.
Okay, lay out the numbers.
So South America started around $9.3 billion in 2021, projected to hit nearly $12 billion by 2025, and then reach over $19 billion by 2033.
Okay, so again, more than doubling over the long term.
Right, and the CAGR is solid, over 6.1%.
And within the region, Brazil leading the way.
Naturally, as the largest economy, it's projected to almost double its market, reaching nearly $6.8 billion. But Argentina is actually showing particularly strong acceleration.
Oh, really?
Yeah, its KGR is over 6.6%, set to reach almost $4 billion. Chile also has a strong CAGR around 6.4%.
Yeah.
Colombia, Peru, they're showing consistent growth too, mostly in the mid to high 5% range.
So it seems like there's a growing recognition across the continent.
I think so. That external strategic guidance is pretty essential for navigating, the economic complexities and really fostering development.
Makes sense. Okay, next stop. The Middle East. Seeing strategic evolution there.
Definitely. There's a lot of transformation happening in that region.
And the consulting market reflects that.
It does. It's anticipated to rise from just under $8 billion in 2021
Okay.
to nearly $10 billion by 2025, and then reaching almost $16 billion by 2033. The overall CAGR is right around 6%.
Similar to South America, then.
Pretty similar overall, yeah. But within the Middle East, some countries are really driving things, reflecting these ambitious national visions, diversification efforts.
Like Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. Saudi Arabia projected to more than double its market, hitting over $4 billion. Turkey is also growing strongly, over 6.3% CAGR. And the UAE boasts a particularly robust CKR, actually the highest in the region at over 6.6%, set to nearly triple its market size to almost $3 billion. You also see good growth in Qatar, Egypt. It points to regions actively investing in new industries, big digital shifts.
And needing consultants to help manage all that.
Precisely, driving that demand for high-level services.
All right, let's round out our regional tour with Africa. A growing footprint, but perhaps starting from a smaller base.
That's right. Smaller overall market size compared to others, but definitely growing.
What are the projections?
It's set to grow from about $5.7 billion in 2021 to almost $7.5 billion by 2025, and reaching nearly $11.5 billion by 2033.
So roughly doubling over the period.
Yes, with a CAGR around 5.5%.
And within Africa, key economies.
We see significant activity. Nigeria, for instance, is projected to more than double its market, reaching over $1.5 billion. But South Africa really stands out.
How so?
It has the highest IDGR in Africa in this data set, just over 6%. It's rising from about 2.2 billion to over 4.8 billion by 2033.
Okay, strong growth there too.
Yeah, it signifies, I think, a growing emphasis on strategic planning, operational improvements,
Yeah.
as these economies mature and integrate more into the global picture.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of numbers. Let's pull back. What does this all mean for you, the listener, for the broader world of business? What's the big picture takeaway here?
Well, I think the really big takeaway is that this comprehensive growth, literally across all regions, it reflects a truly profound global shift
A shift towards.
towards businesses, really regardless of their size or location, seeing strategic consulting services as, well, vital partners.
Not just nice to have, but need to have.
Exactly. It's not just about gaining an edge anymore. For many, it feels like it's about survival, about thriving in a world that demands constant innovation, deep digital transformation, really skillful management of organizational change,
And navigating risk.
and navigating incredibly complex risks. Yeah. So what we're really seeing is this realization that relying only on internal expertise, it's just not enough anymore for many companies.
Right.
Those external insights, that specialized knowledge, it's becoming indispensable, not just to survive, like I said, but to really thrive in this, dynamic environment we're all in.
That's a really clear picture. It's been quite the journey through the future of the business management consulting market. The scale, the speed of evolution, it's remarkable. It tells a big story about business adaptation.
It really does. And, given this immense global demand, this constant search for strategic insights, for guidance, it does raise an interesting question, doesn't it?
Oh, what's that?
Well, how will this constant pursuit of external expertise reshape traditional business structures?
Yeah.
Maybe even the nature of employment itself.
Interesting point.
And perhaps more optimistically, what kind of new, maybe unexpected opportunities might this create? For individuals, for new kinds of firms, basically for anyone who can offer those fresh, insightful perspectives in what's clearly an increasingly complex world.
That is a great thought to ponder, something for all of us to think about.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for walking us through all that data and insight, and thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Hope you found it useful. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a closer look at a sector that's just absolutely vital for how modern businesses operate. We're talking about the business management consulting service market. And this isn't just, big suits telling companies what to do. It's a really dynamic, evolving landscape. Super crucial in the global economy.
Absolutely. It touches almost everything.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack what's driving its growth, what's holding it back, the restraints, and maybe most importantly, the big trends shaping its future. By the end, you should have a really clear picture of what's moving this whole sector.
Okay, so let's dive in. When we looked at our sources, what really jumped out first as a key driver, for me, it was this huge demand for strategic planning and, well, operational efficiency.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Companies everywhere, pretty much every industry, seem to be trying to streamline, cut costs, make better decisions faster.
Yeah. And the sources say consulting firms step in here. They offer, like, industry-specific strategies, benchmarking tools, frameworks, that sort of thing. But is it, are companies genuinely struggling more now to do this themselves, or is it just different?
I think it's both. They're definitely struggling more, partly because the pace of change is just relentless. Internal teams are often, swamped. They're trying to keep the lights on and innovate at the same time. It's tough.
You put the strain on resources.
Exactly. And that ties right into the next big driver, all the rapid market changes and digital disruption. Think about AI, automation, cloud computing. They're reshaping business environments incredibly fast. And what's interesting is that consultants are kind of uniquely positioned to bridge that, let's call it AI literacy gap inside companies.
Okay.
They help turn buzzwords into actual plans, plans that internal teams often just don't have the bandwidth or maybe the specific expertise to create on their own.
That's a great point. It's not just buying the tech, it's figuring out how to weave it in.
Right. Precisely. Integration is key.
My sources also highlighted that this whole shift towards transformation, towards tech adoption, is really cranking up demand for that kind of future-forward expertise.
Definitely.
And speaking of big-picture changes, another massive growth factor is globalization. And tied to that, the increasingly complex regulatory environments.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
Companies go cross-border, and suddenly they're in this maze of different legal systems, tax rules, cultural stuff.
It's like navigating a jungle, like you said.
Yeah. So how are consultants helping specifically with that tangle of international complexity?
Well, they're providing really critical support, things like market entry blueprints if you're moving into a new region,
Hmm.
or say M&A integration support, making sure mergers actually work across different legal and cultural lines.
Got it.
So the need for that region-specific regulatory savvy advice is just climbing steadily. It gives the market a real global push.
And that applies across the board. Big corporations and startups.
Yeah, pretty much from the giants down to, smaller players just dipping their toes into international waters. They act as that vital external brain. But, it's not all smooth sailing. Even with all this growth, there are some pretty significant hurdles, restraints, as we call them. And the most obvious one, I think, that came up in our sources is just the high cost of these services.
Right. Sticker shock.
Exactly. Engaging a top-tier consulting firm, especially for big transformation projects, can be really expensive, and that's particularly tough for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs.
Yeah, they don't have the same deep pockets.
Precisely. So a lot of those smaller firms end up relying on their own internal people or maybe more affordable freelance experts, and that kind of slows down the adoption of consulting services in those more budget-conscious segments. Pricing is still a major hurdle for wider access.
Hmm. Are you thinking any shifts there, like innovative pricing models or different ways of delivering the service to maybe lower that barrier, besides just freelancers, I mean?
That's a good question. The sources didn't highlight anything revolutionary on pricing models themselves, but it does connect to the next restraint,
Which is?
which is the dependence on the client actually doing stuff, client-side execution.
Ah, right. The best plan in the world doesn't help if it just sits on a shelf.
Exactly. No matter how brilliant the consultant's advice is, success hinges on how well the client implements it.
And my sources pointed out the roadblocks there meet maybe a lack of technical skill internally, or leadership isn't fully bought in, or just plain old resistance to change.
All of the above. Those things can totally derail implementation.
Yeah.
And that waters down the impact, affects satisfaction, and crucially, whether they come back for more business.
So the execution support becomes just as critical as the initial strategy.
Absolutely. It's like being given a great recipe. If you don't have the right ingredients or maybe the skill to actually cook it, the meal's not going to work out.
Good analogy.
And that brings up another point for clients' perceived value, or sometimes the lack of it. A recurring grumble in our sources is that sometimes consulting firms tend to overuse, one-size-fits-all models or frameworks.
The cookie cutter approach.
Right. And clients feel these standardized solutions don't really get their unique company culture or their specific market situation. It feels impersonal, maybe lacks deep industry knowledge or that tailored touch.
And when clients feel that way,
Well, trust erodes. Long-term relationships suffer. This skepticism about generic solutions, it's still a hurdle, especially in industries that really need highly customized insights.
so you think it's a real hurdle, not just perception.
I think it's real, yeah. Particularly in niche sectors. You really can't just apply a template everywhere. Every company's got its own DNA.
Yeah, definitely. Which actually leads us perfectly into the future trends, because I think they're trying to address some of this.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. One of the biggest trends our sources picked up is the rise of digital and data-driven consulting.
Big one. Leading firms are heavily integrating big data analytics, machine learning, AI.
Using the tech themselves.
Exactly. To make their recommendations sharper, more agile. It's a shift away from purely qualitative advice towards generating really data-backed insights.
Right, connecting performance metrics directly to strategic goals.
How's that changing the day-to-day work for consultants, do you think?
Oh, it's a game changer. It means engagements move from being sort of theoretical plans
Yeah.
to having measurable real-world impact baked in.
Okay.
Consultants aren't just giving educated opinions anymore. They're providing strategies backed by empirical evidence, showing clients, for instance, exactly where investing will likely yield the best return.
More concrete.
Much more concrete. And this demand for precision, for specialized insight, it's fueling another powerful trend, the rise of niche and boutique consulting firms.
Smaller players. Yeah. While the big global giants still dominate, a lot of the market share, these smaller specialist firms are carving out really strong positions. They offer deep expertise in specific areas like ESG, environmental, social governance, or, say, digital customer experience or human capital stuff.
So hyper-focused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you reckon is the main appeal there for clients going with these smaller guys?
Well, based on the sources, it's definitely their ability to give more hands-on customized service. They
Hmm.
often really get the client-specific world because they're so
Yeah, they
specialized.
speak the language.
Yeah. And that appeals to clients who are tired of broad, maybe generic solutions and want something truly tailored.
Makes sense.
And then the third big trend is how the consulting model itself is changing with the growth of remote and virtual consulting.
Yes, the pandemic effect.
Totally.
Yeah.
That big shift of virtual work
Yeah.
really kicked the doors open for new ways to engage clients.
Mm.
So now you have firms running virtual strategy workshops, using cloud-based tools for diagnostics, operating fully remote teams across different countries.
Yeah, the geography barrier is much lower.
So what does that mean for the industry long-term? For reach, accessibility?
Well, several things. It means potentially reduced costs, less travel, less overhead, more flexibility for both consultants and clients. And crucially, it expands client access to diverse global talent pools.
So a small business somewhere remote could tap into world-class expertise easier than before.
Potentially, yes. Without the huge travel budgets, it's really setting the stage for a much more connected, more digitized future for consulting. It changes how expertise gets shared and used.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what does this mean for you, our listener? The business management consulting service market is clearly going through a phase of intelligent transformation. That seems like the right word.
Yeah, I like that.
It's being profoundly shaped by tech disruption, by globalization,
Hmm.
and yeah, challenges around cost and that one-size-fits-all perception, they definitely persist.
They do?
But the opportunities being created by digitization, by specialization, by virtual delivery, they seem immense.
It's huge potential, yeah.
So here's something to think about. How might these evolving trends in consulting reshape how any kind of expertise is delivered and accessed in the future? What new models of collaboration might emerge from this whole intelligent transformation, maybe going beyond what we traditionally think of as consulting?